Hello everyone and welcome to Community Spotlight exclusively here on RCN. Glad you could join us tonight. I'm Dan Mowdy. Lower Macungie Township is growing in leaps and bounds. There is a core of history there though that really is being preserved by some folks that have Lower Macungie near and dear to their hearts. And what a great history it has. You've got that history, you've got some great development going on there. Population is growing in Lower Macungie, one of the fastest growing areas in the Lehigh Valley and in all of the state of Pennsylvania. We're very happy to be focusing tonight on Lower Macungie Township's Historical Society and all of the good work that they're doing in that township. Joining us today, we have the Vice President of Lower Macungie Township Historical Society, Ann Bartholomew. Ann, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Thank you.
We also have one of the instrumental people in the development of Hamilton Crossings, Tim Harrison. Tim, welcome to Community Spotlight.
Great to be here.
And also joining us is the president of Lower Macungie Township Historical Society, also an author of Roush Handwork and Company Builders, Jordan, Pennsylvania. That's Sarah Jane Williams. Sarah Jane, welcome back to Community Spotlight.
Thank you.
Sarah Jane, I'll ask you to kind of get things started off here. Lower Macungie Township, great place as far as all that it has to offer. Fantastic school district. The quality of life there seems to be very good. You've got some new stores and great places to shop there. What's it like being a resident?
Well, that's a good question. It's a wonderful place to live. I think people feel safe. They have a lot of amenities. It's close to everything that you'd want. And we still have enough farmland preserved that, and we're working on preserving more open space with the help of our commissioners to keep it very livable. Fantastic.
And your involvement with the Historical Society, how did that all begin?
There was a home that was scheduled for demolition, and I became incensed over that because it was a beautiful historic structure, and the barn as well. And I went to one of the meetings and decided that I had to become an active voice in the township to preserve historic structures. So that was the start of it, and I met Ann Bartholomew and her husband Craig, who were the leaders in the Historical Society. And they became great inspirations for me, and here I am.
Fantastic. And you've been a part of the Historical Society from the start then?
Yes, actually before the Historical Society was formed, I was chairman of the Bicentennial Committee in the township, and that's when we published this history book that is in fact one of the, possibly the largest, but one of the largest in the state of Pennsylvania, and quite detailed. We were able at that time in the 1970s to speak with a number of people who had very strong family recollections, wonderful stories to tell us about how it had been in the past, stuff that's anecdotal, not written down, and you can't find it once these people have died, and we spoke with quite a lot of them. It was a very fruitful experience.
Fantastic. And Lower Macungie sounds to me, back in the agricultural days, or when agriculture was more prevalent perhaps, to be a place maybe where a parcel stayed with a family for a long time. Would that be the case?
That is very much the case, yes. And you'll hear later in the show how farmers also were quite willing to dig up their land for iron ore, which was the hidden gold underneath their fields.
Is that right? Absolutely. Yes. Tim, a man from New York, next to my own heart, from Long Island, but what brought you to Lower Macungie?
I came to Lower Macungie to work on this project, the Hamilton Crossings project. I put the property under agreement on January 6th of 2009, and we opened officially on November 18th of 2016. So
fantastic.
It was a 7-year process.
You know, in a way, it sounds like all three of you have something in common. You all have a part of preserving a piece of Lower Macungie's history. Tim, I know the development story is quite interesting too. Hamilton Crossings, of course, is probably the newest, I would say, place to shop in anywhere in the Lehigh Valley.
It is, and it's a large development project. It's 570,000 square feet. It's anchored by the first Costco in the Lehigh Valley, the first Whole Foods in the Lehigh Valley, the first Nordstrom Rack in the Lehigh Valley. Many great restaurants and other stores, and And fortunately for the development team, we had a very good collaboration with the Historical Society.
Fantastic.
We learned a lot about the history of the site, and we're going to memorialize the history of the site in 11 interpretive storyboards that are going to be placed on a 2.5-mile interior walking trail.
Wow, that sounds phenomenal. Now that goes above and beyond what I think most developers would bring to a shopping site that's their project. And it goes beyond that, I understand, that there actually was a property that was adjacent to the project that needed some special tender care?
Well, yes, there was a very old house within about 25 feet of an entranceway, so we had to be very careful about buffering and landscaping to protect that property.
Ah, interesting. And of course, the property came to light. I imagine the Historical Society had a great interest in making sure that the new and the old could kind of peacefully coexist right next to each other.
Well, the log house is the property, so to speak, of the Lower Macungie Township Historical Society, and that's how we met Tim. And we negotiated this wonderful outcome of having the storyboards, and they graded the property for us and put a walking path in, and did some landscaping, and it really is beautiful. The outside looks better than it ever did.
Absolutely, it's beautiful. Just taking a look at the pictures here. And Tim, I understand that I guess some of the accesses to Hamilton Crossings needed to be adjusted, which, you know, change orders, looking at it from a strictly business standpoint, are never what a developer wants to see cross their desk. But it sounds like your firm was pretty accommodating with making sure that history was preserved.
Yes, it was a great collaboration, and it was our pleasure.
Excellent, excellent. And tell us in detail maybe what some of the changes that needed to be made.
Well, the biggest change was when we did our geotechnical analysis of the site, we discovered that there was an enormous quantity of highly saturated material that wouldn't support buildings or even a parking lot. And we had no idea where this came from. It was something we had no experience with. And did a little research and found that it came from iron mining. Basically, iron mining began on this site in the 1870s. And by the time it concluded, some decades hence, the site was literally perforated with mining pits. And
that's what happens, you create the caverns and the water finds them, I guess, underneath the surface?
Well, to be a little more specific about it, the miners would extract the iron ore from these pits.
You know what, Tim, we're gonna come back to this story because it's interesting. It sounds like a lot of Macungie territory might have this same situation. Oh, yeah. But we'll take a quick break here and be right back with our next segment of Community Spotlight. Stay with us. And you're back with us here with Community Spotlight. We're talking about Lower Macungie, and specifically the Lower Macungie Historical Society. Great township and such great history. We're learning about some of the developing that has gone on there currently, which kind of reflects back on some of the development that took place there in the form of mining in years gone by. Our guests again, Ann Bartholomew, Tim Harrison, and Sarah Jane Williams. Tim, we were talking a little bit about some of the challenges, and you know, it's probably easy to see, or it takes talent, no doubt about it, to find a parcel of land that would be a good place to develop, depending on what your purposing is. What a great place Hamilton Crossings is for world-class shopping, but it sounds like you found some interesting under-the-surface challenges there.
Some major challenges that related to the legacy of iron mining on the site, and literally 333,000 cubic yards of material that had to be removed and replaced with clean fill before we could build.
Is that right? Wow. And I guess the problem was that in the mining days there was a process that...
Right. When the iron ore was extracted from the ground, it was embedded in sediment, and that sediment had to be washed off. So water was used to separate the sediment from the iron was then taken to the foundry, but the sediment was typically just deposited right back into the mine pits as soon as their economic viability had been finished. And that's what we found. The site was literally perforated like Swiss cheese with these pits. Some were deeper than 28 feet. And we had to dig all that out.
Wow.
Put it in dump trucks, about 50,000 dump truck loads, and
wait, how many?
50,000, and
goodness.
take it to another location where a landowner was willing to allow us to impound it.
I see. They took the hard stuff out of the ground and they put the soft stuff in there, and that didn't make for a very good foundation. It sounds
right.
like, but adequate for a log house, I would think.
Well, the log house was not on the same location as this particular shopping center. So, yeah, it was not in a field, and the fields were the ones that tended to be vulnerable to this exploitation of the resources below. Now, one thing Tim didn't say is that he found a historical remnant there that we really didn't know about. It's sort of referred to in a couple books, but he found remnants of an old railroad that was never constructed. It was fully graded. It was to have brought Schuylkill County or Schuylkill Valley anthracite through to Allentown for the iron furnaces. But then a panic took place. Every 20 years or so there was a panic, major financial slump, and they stopped work on it, completely stopped work on it, but they had done bridge abutments, and he found some.
Oh yes, we had a small piece of property still owned by the Reading Railroad. And we had to go negotiate with them and buy it.
Really?
Yeah, it was 20 feet wide and 60 feet long.
So was it pretty much buried at this point?
Just a piece of land that had been part of an old railroad right-of-way that went right across the site. As Ann said, the railroad was never built. Most of the land had been sold over the years, but Reading Railroad still owned a tiny piece, and
they had the rights.
We had to buy it.
Wow, that's just remarkable. And you know, the rail has a significant place in history when it comes to Lower Macungie Township.
Absolutely.
What are some of the facets of that part of the history?
I think Ann can.
Yeah, I can pick up on that. It all really came about because of anthracite being found in eastern Pennsylvania. First, the canal was used to transport anthracite. Then they built railroads along the river, Lehigh River. Then the Schuylkill Valley anthracite was being shipped by canal down to the Philadelphia area. But there was so much demand for it because it was the fuel of the Industrial Revolution. And they built a railroad. The first one was the East Penn branch of the Reading Railroad, became the Reading Railroad. It was originally the East Pennsylvania Railroad, and it came right through Albertus, Lower Macungie, Emmaus. You'll find that there were little furnaces, local furnaces dotted along there because the anthracite was being brought in as the fuel for the furnaces. The limestone that was used as flux in the furnaces was found in local limestone quarries, and the ore, as we have described, was found all around the area. In fact, Lower Macungie had more iron ore mines than any other municipality in the whole of Lehigh County.
Yeah, in the 1880s, in the decade of the 1880s, Pennsylvania produced more iron ore than any other state in the United States. And Lehigh County produced more iron ore than any other county in Pennsylvania.
Interesting. And the technique to mine the ore was?
There were two techniques. The technique most common was just digging pits and extracting ore. The other technique was to prepare shaft mines, which went deeper into the ground, but they were much more difficult to do.
I see. And was it a case where some of these farm owners were doing their own mining? Or?
Yes.
So you had family farms and family mines all in one?
Yes, actually the mine on the Hamilton Crossings property belonged to a family by the name of Bastian, Jonas Bastian, and he and his sons mined the property themselves.
Generally, they contracted with one of the local furnaces or agents for furnaces. One of the interesting things you'll find in some of the deep mines where there were shafts going in, that was used during Prohibition. Did you know that, Tim?
No.
Used during Prohibition to store stuff that was illegal.
Contraband.
Yeah. A thriving part of the local economy.
We actually built a public art installation as part of Hamilton Crossings 2, which is a replica of what a mining head frame would look like above a shaft mine.
Fantastic.
Which would raise and lower a mining car. And we actually acquired 2 antique mining cars as well.
And then we're taking a look at it. That is,
Yeah. That's it.
that is an eye catcher. That's unique right there. And what a great piece of history to be able to preserve.
Yes, that's a visual focal point of the whole shopping center.
Fantastic. So that's kind of, you would see those kind of sprinkled about the terrain and the horizon back in the day, I guess.
Exactly.
Probably not bright red, but yes.
Not when they were actually being used, right?
What was more prominent was the washeries, because they had to take all of this ore out of the ground, and they would carry it up to a high point, and then they would have streams of water going through it and long runs that would be depositing the clay at the bottom.
Wow. Fantastic. So much to learn, and so much interesting heritage to be found in Lower Macungie Township. We're here with the folks from the Historical Society from that great township. We'll have some more right after this on Community Spotlight. And you're back with us here on Community Spotlight. Lmths History.org. That's Lower Macungie Township History.org if you want to spell it out, but Lmths.org is the place to go to find out all about the rich tradition and heritage of Lower Macungie Township. Ann Bartholomew, Tim Harrison, and Sarah Jane Williams, kind enough to spend part of their day here with us in our RCN studios. And these signboards sound great. Hamilton Crossings, the new place to go shopping, also has a 2.5-mile circuit for walking, and you can learn a little bit about Lower Macungie Township's history on those signboards. Such things as Kings Highway and Jasper Mine come to mind. But let's talk a little bit about the signboards. Ann, I know you've had a big part in what went on those boards.
Tim was actually very generous and sort of surprised us by offering to make these big signboards, which we had never worked on before. We collected photographs and text. That was the hard part, because you have to condense like pages and pages of information into 300 words, and I've never done such tight writing in my life, but we got it done. And I think that we have enough illustrations there that people are going to be very intrigued by our local history. It's much broader than just farming with a few villages dotted around. And we've gone into the cultural aspects too, barns and other decorative arts and music, and villages which coalesced around a few central buildings at crossroads usually. We talk about the Kings Highway, which is Hamilton Boulevard. That's right along the southern border of this new shopping center, and it in fact was one of the most important highways in Pennsylvania and the early American colonies. It was authorized by the King's agents, and it was constructed in the 1750s, if I'm correct, and it was just a dirt track, but it was an official road. Much of it followed Indian trails that had been used for centuries, obviously.
So you said commissioned by the king. So before,
by the King's agents.
Before the USA was a country,
oh yes,
we had the king building infrastructure in America.
Authorizing
in
Yes.
Lower Macungie Township.
Yes, and parts of Route 100 are also a King's Highway, and that also comes through our township. And other parts of the county, Lehigh County, you'll see little roads called King's Highway, and there's others that aren't marked in any way that were early King's Highways. It just means an early highway that had the approval of the King's authorities. There was a group of men down in Philadelphia that made these decisions.
I see. Tim, it sounds like you caught what we have here in the Lehigh Valley a little bit.
Well, I learned a great deal, and I learned a lot of it from Ann and Sarah Jane. There are 11 different topics. The interpretive boards are organized topically, so as you walk along the walking trail, starting in the environs of the Lower Macungie Township Park, where the log house is, you'll go chronologically, starting with the Native American people who lived in the township, then the early settlers, then as society evolved in the township, different businesses, transportation, art and culture, education,
Fantastic.
It really tells a very thorough story.
Excellent, excellent. You know, I got to give this historical society great credit for being able to communicate your story in so many different fashions. The signboard's a great illustration right in the space that people occupy on a regular basis, Hamilton Crossings, where they do their shopping. Your website is extraordinary. That's lmthistory.org. And you also have the printed materials as keepsakes, and very informative, great stuff to hand down generationally. And tell us a little bit about some of the materials that you've got here.
Okay. We have the history of Lower Macungie Township, which Ann Bartholomew and her husband Craig authored, or co-authored, I should say, for the bicentennial, and it's quite a treasure. We have a newsletter that's published 2 or 3 times a year that has very informative articles, some short, some longer. We had a 25th anniversary celebration and put together a booklet with stories about the township and the history. We had a barn expo. We've had barn...
and the barns are extraordinary.
Yes.
I imagine Pennsylvania Dutch influence on many of these barns?
Yes, Pennsylvania Dutch, Pennsylvania German, however you'd like to refer to it. And recently we had barn stars painted on the Shantz barn, which is located next to the community center in Lower Macungie Township on Brookside Road, with Patrick Donmoyer overseeing the project, and Eric Claypool, who's several generations and his family have been barn star artists. So we're thrilled with the results of that.
And the barn stars, I understand, served an architectural purpose too. They kind of held things together with structural integrity.
No, they were considered to be more decorative,
Oh, is that right?
but some believe that they were like blessings that you would put on the barn, or talismans, or whatever you would want to call them, that would ensure there was safety for the animals and that type of thing, or rain or sun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I want to quickly mention, as we're almost out of time, your website lists the seminars that you put on with the folks that are in the know, the experts. Some great stuff there. Folks, I want to thank you for coming on Community Spotlight today. And again, it's lmthistory.org. Lower Macungie Township Historical Society has a lot going on. Hope you enjoy that. I'm Dan Mowdy. Thanks for joining us tonight on Community Spotlight. Good night, everybody.